Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I have finally finished Crime and Punishment. It only took me about 8 months, which I know is a very long time, but trust me, I wanted to fully take my time with this because it was my first Dostoevsky novel, as well as my first introduction to Russian literature. I wanted to make this video because I'm somebody who considers themselves a new reader. So something like a Dostoevsky or even a novel that was written back in the 1800s is just typically not something I pick up. And I feel like there are a lot of videos from people who are experts on this matter or people who read a lot, but there aren't many videos from people like me who are just now getting into reading and have decided to step into the world of Dostoevsky. I was very worried that the language was going to be my biggest issue. As somebody who struggled reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, I don't know why, but I felt like something from the 1800s was just going to be really difficult for me to read and get into, especially because it's such a big novel. But I am happy to report that at least this translation, Oliver Reedy's translation, I believe this was published in the 2010s. This was a very easy translation to get into. The difference between this and the Garnett translation and other translations that have been published there, and it seems to be one that is closest to the original and one that kind of removes a lot of the old antiquated language and sort of modernizes it a bit. Don't be scared, it's still it still feels like this is a work from the 1800s. I still had to pull up my dictionary multiple times because there are a lot of words that I was just not familiar with. But like I said, I think this is a very good translation for someone who is like me, new to reading, new to the world of Russian literature. I mentioned that it took me about 8 months to finish this, and that's because I would basically read a few parts of this, then kind of pick another book up, finish that, and then pick this up again. If you didn't know, this was initially published in a literary magazine, and it was published in a few different series, right? You can definitely tell that. I don't know that this is a book that is meant to be binge read because it's just so dense and it's full of very interesting details that really make you want to sit there and think about the questions that are being posed here. I've heard people say they've read this in a month. I've heard people say they've read it in 3 months. Hey, I read it in 8 months and I still had such a good time. So if you're a new reader like me, don't be afraid to take your time with this. I think the best way to read this book is in little chunks. So what I mean by that is you read one part a day. Maybe you do one part in the morning, and then you do one part in the afternoon, and then you do another part in the evening, right? Once you read one part, you kind of do have to step away for a little bit, sort of absorb what you've read, and then come back to read the follow-up, because there's a lot of instances in this book, particularly in the beginning and the end, that really make you question what it is that you're reading and the morals and motivations of different characters here. So definitely don't be afraid to take your time and reread any passages that you don't understand. Also, have your dictionary ready. You will need your dictionary with this. Don't be afraid. Honestly, I have 2 dictionary apps on my phone. My vocabulary has expanded so much, and I have to say it's all thanks to this book. I want to talk about Dostoevsky for a minute and share why I was interested in reading him in the first place. So of course, I have been familiar with this man my entire life. I was a big Tumblr girl in my past, so his quotes and sort of the lore of his life are just something that I've been aware of for many years. But honestly, it wasn't until I read Elif Batuman's The Idiot that I decided to read Dostoevsky. I honestly feel like I am not the only person to say this out loud. The Idiot makes such a strong case for why you should read Russian literature that throughout the entire novel, you really do kind of get the itch to just get into it, right? If you have never read The Idiot, it's basically a campus novel set in the 90s, and the main character is taking some Russian classes, and she just is a very big fan of Russian literature. So this passion and like love really comes through the pages. I also find his backstory, his lore to be so interesting. We're talking about a man who had a gambling addiction, epilepsy, a toxic situationship. He was a political prisoner, spent 10 years in Siberia, and basically had a near-death experience after being pardoned from being like executed at the public square. Like, this is a man whose life significantly influenced his work, and the fact that there's so much lore about this just makes the whole reading experience really exciting for me. I wish every author had this much gossip around them, because it really does elevate your reading experience. As you would know, picking your first Dostoevsky requires a little bit of research, and I basically decided to pick Crime and Punishment after realizing that there were just a lot of resources about this novel out there, and in the case that I felt lost or like I didn't understand anything, I could just go to the internet and ask, research, look things up. Now, of course, there are resources on like all of his other novels, but something I learned through my research is that, for example, something like The Brothers Karamazov is just going to tackle more complex themes that perhaps a first-time Dostoevsky reader may find overwhelming. So I was like, okay, no worries, I'll just do Crime and Punishment and then see how that goes. You may be asking yourself, what is Crime and Punishment about? At its core, Crime and Punishment is about a young man named Raskolnikov, who is basically a law school dropout living in 1800s St. Petersburg. Raskolnikov is kind of like going through a really tough time in his life. He is basically extremely poor after dropping out of school and leaving his job. One day he gets the idea to kill this lady who is basically like the neighborhood's pawnbroker, because his argument is that like there are people in this world who cause so much harm and suffering that murdering them perhaps can be justifiable, right? The question of morality is posed throughout the entire novel through different situations and things that happen to the different characters that we meet here. And very much like the Bible, each argument is up for interpretation. Let it be known that this man will test you. He will test your moral compass. He will test the beliefs that you have about life. And he will do this by basically having different characters argue with each other about things like class, education, morality, what is right or wrong, and like who gets to decide whether a crime is justifiable or not. Something that stood out to me the most, if I'm being honest with you, is the lies that you can tell yourself in a moment of panic. Boy, do you have to be careful about the things that you lie to yourself about. This novel really taught me that, very much like that saying, the road to hell was paved with good intentions. You will realize how Raskolnikov essentially has so much guilt that the guilt is his punishment. The paranoia is his jail. And what ultimately saves him is not paying for his crime by going to jail, but by falling in love with Sonia, who is the prostitute of this story. Sonia, to me, is the most interesting character in this book. I thought it was so clever to have the sex worker, someone who in society, especially back then, is seen as like the lowest in terms of morality, have the strongest moral compass and have her be like the most religious, faithful person in the entire story. Because she is so selfless, she ends up helping so many people along the way, which ultimately weakens Raskolnikov's argument of like killing the pawnbroker to save other people or to help other people. Because Sonia, just by being selfless and like helping others out of the kindness of her heart, ends up affecting so many other people and being like a positive influence to them. You see this particularly towards the very end of this novel when Raskolnikov, oh, I don't want to spoil it, but like he goes somewhere, and Sonia follows him, and basically she becomes someone very respected by the townspeople because of the help that she is able to provide them. You see how there's like so much we can pull from here. This was so interesting. I found the pacing of this book to be perfectly fine. I mean, the beginning and the end were significantly more interesting than the middle. The middle does have a lot of dialogue between certain characters that basically show you the moral ambiguity of different people based on like the topic of conversation. My advice to you, if you feel like the middle is kind of boring and is not really like advancing the plot, would be for you to listen to this on audiobook. Now, hear me out. I'm not the biggest fan of audiobooks because I feel like a book like this is not meant to be listened to while you do the dishes or you do your laundry. However, like there are certain parts that I did listen on audio, and I felt like as soon as I was starting to drift off or like kind of lose focus a bit, I would just stop the audiobook and then pick this right back up. And that basically solved my problem whenever I felt like I was like hitting a wall. Perhaps it's because this is translated fiction, but I found, for example, something like The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde to be significantly more complex than this book. It must be because the translation done by Oliver Reedy was just so good that it really feels so timeless. I have no hesitation recommending a new reader to approach this because it really was so approachable. And like I said, have your dictionary ready. You will need it, but like don't be afraid and don't be intimidated. You can do this. This was such an interesting novel, and because there's so much content created around this book, you will be in very good company. Like you can finish this book and look up reviews, look up like different people's interpretation of the themes, and I swear you're gonna have so much fun because it lends itself for that. I think that's all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. I was a little intimidated, honestly, coming over here and like telling you guys why you should read Crime and Punishment, but I really hope that I was able to help you if you are a new reader and you're afraid to pick this book up. And honestly, like I really look forward to reading more Dostoevsky. I am planning on possibly reading one of his books a year. I don't know if I want to do The Idiot next, or maybe I should just do something like White Nights, which is like a shorter work of fiction. So we shall see, but yeah, I am definitely going to remain a fan of Dostoevsky. I really look forward to continuing my education with his novels, and I really think that you should do the same. Okay, thank you for watching. Please let me know if you've read Crime and Punishment. Which novel do you think I should pick up next? And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to coming back and seeing you again. Okay, thank you.